All right, so you got some feedback from the last podcast, you said. Podcast.
Yeah. People were pretty happy to hear some stuff about the old days and a little bit of acknowledgement that I guess I kind of know what I'm doing. I don't know. I miss doing stuff like this. I used to do like interviews every now and then.
Right.
Um, Back right before like the Xbox Live UMK3 came out, I did a couple of interviews, and then it started becoming more of like, oh, here, like answer these questions like via email or something like that. And I was just like, all right, I like talk.
Yeah, not quite the same.
Yeah. Um, and then of course I used to do a podcast called Aristocrats Radio. Which,
Yeah. You don't do that anymore?
No, the guys. See, we all grew up together, and we still live in the same area.
Right.
I hate doing like a group chat where it's just like a bunch of people, whatever. It's like just really, really annoying because you can't get visual cues. It's very difficult to get visual cues when you're doing that. Even if you can see the person there, it's just not the same as having them in the room with you.
Right.
So we all would go to one person's house and set everything up with like microphone stands, and I'm like basically behind the computer just like I am at a tournament or whatever, running production. We eventually built it up to that point, and we would just do like pop culture and current events, stuff like that, mostly a lot of personal stories, because we all, like I said, we've all known each other 20, 30 years now. There's a lot to talk about.
Right.
So
yeah.
And we did that from like 2005 to 2007 on our first run, and that was like the infancy of podcasts. Nobody really, your average person, let alone I should say your average internet user, let alone your average person, didn't really have, microphones and headsets and like, producers, like creative kind of stuff. Like we all had that kind of knowledge, or at least enough of us did.
Right.
So we put together this podcast, just basically friends just kind of BSing, and then it blew up. All of a sudden, some comedy group from based in New York, they contacted us because they needed a show to fill in live once a week, and we're like, wow, live? Like we're used to doing the podcast, and now that we really edited stuff at all, because we all can talk and talk. But then we started to do live twice a week, and me and the other guy, the main guy who did it, we did it like every single week for like 9 months, didn't miss a single week. And that was like nobody on the whole network did that.
Right.
We didn't have anything better to do, but but we did it at the guy's apartment, and it was a blast. But eventually things fell through, and we took a few years off. We came back and we did it full steam again, and by then we had stuff like Justin TV and then eventually Twitch. But Twitch, you really couldn't do anything but games at first, and eventually they loosened the restrictions on that. So if we wanted to come back and do it now, I would just do it through Combat Network. We'd have to clean it up and like probably water it down a lot, because we would get pretty bad with the content, and the brutality. But
hey, it is what it is. You have to. It's live. You're live, and anything can happen.
It's not worth losing the 30,000 followers on on Twitch for some of the stuff that we would say. So.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
But
so, kind of going based off of the last discussion that we had with going back X amount of years and discussing about how far back things went and how far they've come. The one thing that I've found very interesting over the years, especially with UMK3, and this is going to be like the part where you're speaking a lot, because I don't know this kind of stuff, and a lot of other people I'm sure don't too. But so whether they came onto the NetherRealm scene 2 years ago, 3 years ago, even maybe 10 years ago, they don't know these certain players that sometimes get mentioned. For example, the histories. Well, yourself and Tom Brady, we kind of discussed a little bit a few days ago, but I mean, not really the meat and potatoes of it, so to speak. But you have other people that you hear about that are like OG players, like original gamer players that were like legends of the time. For example, you hear about L.I. Joe. There's Lex. There's help me out here. Now earlier, all the names are coming to mind. Oh, so, Marvarasa.
Marvaros is like so he came on at least to notoriety after the Xbox Live era. He may very well have been playing online on like Kylera, but I didn't really know him probably until the late like 2000s, like 2007, 2008 at the earliest that I can remember. And I remember a lot of things that I know about people are secondhand information because I was not around everywhere when in the 90s and stuff. But when you go back to the Chicago days, there were some players who stuck around until they didn't want it to be around anymore, meaning like the game itself, because like you don't know when like I think Deadly Alliance was like the new game, like there was so much just trash talking on Shoryuken between all these different little groups, and you really only had, from what I can tell, Chicago, New York, New Jersey, and New Jersey really wasn't even like a thing. There, like summoning tells me that like there were like rumors of like guys in Jersey that were like really good because they had their scene on Long Island and they all knew each other. But I don't know how true that is, because like they couldn't possibly like be talking about like me or Prophet or Tom Brady or I really don't know. But I was just a guy who was traveling around New Jersey, a kid I should say, and playing when I could, whereas these guys were already doing like the kind of stuff that we've been doing now, since, like the early 2000s. They were doing that stuff on a smaller level. So you do have guys like Lex and Paulo. They were players back in the day. Eddie Ferrier.
Yeah. So Paulo, of course.
Alex Hernandez. They were all, I think that's his name. If I'm wrong, anybody knows that's his name.
So just so everyone knows, when you talk about Paulo, I know who you're talking about, but you're talking about Paulo Garcia of NetherRealm Studios.
Yes.
That's awesome. I know that, but maybe some others people don't know, how far back Paulo goes.
You would get an excellent podcast just if you interviewed Summoning, and he could tell. He has more history going back further than I do, and he knows everybody. His group, and they have all their guys that nobody knows about, but he has, I've met probably a dozen people who were playing MK in the 90s who haven't even touched the game in years, and they've just come back around because he tells people like, hey, we got everything, we got the band's back together basically, and we got stuff going on, and they've kind of like in dribs and drabs, they've come back over the years, and they've made their appearances, and you get to know all these guys who had like a hand in the grooming of like a brain like of someone like Summoning, who would eventually be a part of like a really like important part people don't realize, whether it's like financially or planning or just like that like emotional support guy, like where like a Tio comes in and is like, I don't think I can do this anymore, and then Summoning's like, bro, you got to do it, bro. We got to do it for the scene, bro. We got to do it. And it's like, you know what? Maybe he's right. That kind of thing, very important. But guys like Jim Fink, he was running events. Summoning was running events. I'm talking like what L.I. Joe mentioned and recently in his arcade days, like he was a part of that. Like as a little kid, if there was ever like a baby born in like the midst of competitive gaming, it was L.I. Joe. He really embodies what it is to be born and bred competitive video game player, and that's where he got his start. So he was nurtured by guys who already had that killer instinct, pardon the pun, because that was his favorite games. It's all a very important part of building what we have now, because you couldn't possibly foresee in like 1993 playing MK1 that eventually people will be playing MK10 for tens of thousands of dollars at a clip is just absolutely unfathomable. But Chicago had tournaments, from what I could tell, and again, I say what I can tell because you hear people talk about stuff, and like the big what's it called, like PAX, like when that thing started, like people would go out and then they would just go to the arcade because they'd be like, oh yeah, that arcade's in the area. So if it was like in Chicago, it's like that's where you go, you know. And they
You're
do it
talking
now.
about the PAX Expo, correct?
Yeah, yes. Like that was like an attraction that people would come to, and then they'd be like, we got to go to like I don't know all the names of the arcades, but I think I hear the name like Nickel City, you know, and then there's always like some guy's name, you know, it's like the name of an arcade, you know. They would go to those afterwards, and they'd all get together and play because they were already connected on the internet when nobody really knew what the internet was.
Right.
So, like I said, you had these guys. They were the brainchilds of the like structure of how we eventually would connect normally. So like before, when I said like not everybody had, or I should say like not even internet users had the ability to do a podcast even, you know, 15 years ago. It's now become such a common thing. It's really part of like hobbyism, basically. Like you have to get this stuff. Like you have a smartphone, so you have to know what's going on. These kinds of things have made our scene much more interconnected, and like everybody knows everybody's business. You know, back in the day, there was a lot of there was mystique. Like you wouldn't know. Like there'd be like an area that you would go to. You like there's an arcade, you know, an hour and a half away, and they got like I heard they got a bunch of guys there that can play, and we're gonna go see, and you know we're gonna see if we can stomp them. We can see, you know, and this is something I never experienced. I never had a group of people to play the game with. It was always like me and like Dreamer NJ. We'd be at like the mall, or like me and the Prophet. You know, we'd go to like Philly, you know, for a Big E tournament. You know, for the weekend.
Right.
That was like, again, this is you're talking 2001, 2002. This is a big deal to us. You know, we're like 20 years old. So it was like we're part of the scene that was what we call like the Wild Wild West, and then we got to kind of see this like condensing of everything, and it's really, really like I don't want to say contrived. Contrived is not like the right word because like we really enjoy the benefits of it. But when you think about that, you can make the magnet and pull everybody together, whereas like it was super spread out. There were arcades everywhere, all over the country.
Yeah.
You know? But there's just these little tiny groups of people, and they never ever get to see each other. You know, it's just
Right.
not happen. So you have to, when you go, like, say you go down to Florida, it's like, oh, there's like an arcade. You're not playing in an arcade like you know, in like a downtown. You may be playing an arcade that's like off of like Disney, whereas like you're never going to see the same person there twice. You know, it's totally different. You would get that back in the day, by the way. The mall. I always say to people, they're like, who is your toughest opponent? They'll ask me in UMK3, and I'll be like, it was some guy at the Freehold Mall in 1999 that I didn't beat a single game because I didn't have enough money. That to me was my toughest opponent. I'm pissed to this day because he's like the only person that I didn't at least take a game off. You know,
Oh, that's a true story. I thought you were kidding.
That's an absolutely true story. So I'm not joking. There's Freehold Mall.
How many matches was it?
It was like it could have only been one, but I remember it was very few matches, and I remember the matchup we were playing was Jade versus Reptile.
You were Reptile?
No, he was Reptile.
Oh, okay.
I was trying to learn Jade at the time. I'm pretty sure that's how it went down. But absolutely, I'm pretty sure it was that match, and we might have played it twice. And I remember it was like, it wasn't like close to closing time, but like I don't know, I must have been. I guess I might have been driving. When was that? And I said 99. It could have been 98. But I do remember having to leave and not having any money left, so I had to be pretty young. But it definitely was probably after MK4 came out, so that would have been 97, 98. So we'll say 98. Sorry, I get a little what's it called? Specific with like the dates and everything, because when you remember everything, it's like, you know, people would call me like the Chronicle. But I just remember playing the guy, and I didn't have, and I went to like, I must have went to go get more money or where, I don't remember how it happened, but I didn't get a chance to play him again. So it was probably that I either had to leave or like something to that effect. And that's actually the same, it was called Time Out, which is like a popular arcade name. I don't know if it's a coincidence or if it's a chain, because I've heard people reference Time Out in different states, and I wouldn't think that an arcade would ever have a big enough reach to get to different states, unless it's Yes Arcades. You never know. He could open in Pennsylvania. Right. But So that's the first arcade that I ever played UMK3, by the way, was the one that I just mentioned. They had it like on a cabinet like you had. Do you still have that?
Yeah, it's in my mother-in-law's garage. Yeah.
Okay, I may be able to take that off your hands, actually.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, it's my father-in-law was like, well, you might want to. I mean, it's in a garage, but you never know what kind of critters can get in there and whatever else. So
you can take care of that. That's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But I'll see what I can do. Maybe. Anyway, getting to that okay. So for those of you who are listening, the Mega Cab is it's like a almost like a custom. It's like a kitted arcade, but you could like make any layout that you wanted and put any like art. Like it wasn't a real cabinet in the sense of like it didn't have side art. It didn't have like a dedicated marquee except maybe for like Tekken. Like those kind of games use those like out of the box, but every now and then you'd like walk into an arcade and you'd be like, what the hell is this thing? It's like a 30-something inch screen, right? Isn't it? Isn't it like a 33 or something like that?
All I remember
It's
is
a big
that
screen and it's vertical.
NEC, when we got the sound working, like for the first time, I just was blown away. I was so happy because like that the sound of that cabinet was like controlling the whole room. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's an arcade cabinet. Those things are made to be loud because they have to compete with the machines next to them. So everything is louder. The arcade machines, especially MK2. MK2 was mind blowing. The sound on that was just the bass and the stereo sound, or it was just absolutely ridiculous.
Now that arcade that you mentioned. Now was that in New Jersey then?
Yes, I was gonna say it's the Freehold Mall, still there. Built in like I don't know, like 91 or 92 or something like that. It's a newer mall, and at the time it's brand new. So, I guess it's probably around November of '95. I think UMK came out around October, and I knew it was out because, like I said, I in the last one I was waiting for MK3 to come out. Like that was major anticipation.
Sure.
Getting all the magazines and stuff, and just for the first time, like it was a game that I could get a jump on that I knew that like nobody else knew anything about, because even at the time, it's like getting into Street Fighter 2. It already had a few years, and people already knew what they were doing, and you had to play catch up. Right. So with MK3 and then UMK3, obviously. So I walk in to timeout. And I see a whole bunch of people, a dozen people all standing around the machine, and I didn't recognize the cabinet, and it didn't look like a typical, what I knew like a Mortal Kombat cabinet to be. And I see it's the Mega Cab, which again has the control set like a couple feet from the screen, and there's like a gap in between where everybody would put their book bags and their coats and shit. So I'm like looking and I'm like, there it is. I'm like, there's UMK3, and here's like 14-year-old. I was a little skinny, pale kid. I'm now like a fat, pale guy, but I was a skinny little pale kid back then. And I like walk up and I'm like, I just can't wait. Like you get the icy feeling. You're like looking around, seeing all the people standing around. And this guy is beating everybody with Sector. He's just like, he's not spamming the teleport uppercuts, but he's using them just right, that everybody who's there doesn't know what the hell they're doing, so they're just getting beat by the missiles and the teleport uppercuts. They're trying to jump away from missiles, getting hit by uppercuts, and I'm like, I can totally beat this guy. And I watched him beat like 3-4 people in a row, and he already had like a win streak by the time I walked in. So I put my quarters in, hit the start button. I'm looking at the select screen. I'm just like, who am I going to pick? So I picked Scorpion, because I'm like, didn't have Scorpion in MK3. Got to try this.
This was the first time that you were playing this game.
First time. You think about this. Like, I'm 37 years old, and I'm telling you a story from when I'm 14 about playing a video game. Friggin' mall off of a food court in the dead center of, like, Podunk, New Jersey. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to wait for him to do that first teleport uppercut, because I saw him doing it with everybody else. I just know he's going to do it. And here's the thing, is like I was reading the magazines and learning all the new combos, and like I'm like, okay, Scorpion's got like the simple 4-hit combo. And this is how I'm thinking. I'm like, I don't want to like pick him and not know what I'm doing, you know? So I figure I just do the combo exactly like you do like one of the other similar combos. So I'm waiting, and we're, just going back and forth. I'm testing out like the teleport punch, like to see it, and it like feels like real solid. I'm like, wow, I'm like, this feels better than MK2. Like I'm thinking of this already, like, and I'm just playing, the game for the first time. And here comes, missiles are coming. Here comes a teleport uppercut, and I blocked the teleport uppercut, and I hit him with a full punish, like a punch, spear, 4-hit combo, and that moment was what locked me in forever to that game. And that's the most succinct way to say what made you like UMK3. It was that moment, that punish of the Sector uppercut, and it never changed after that. And that's what started my whole journey for competitive gaming, because that was the first time that I really, really took it seriously. And needless to say, I never lost a match that night. And my mother comes up to me and is like, "We got to go." So and at this time I'm just like horsing around with all my other MK3 characters. And I remember the last character I was Kung Lao. And I'm like, all right, let me finish this match. And I finished the match. I beat the guy. I did the fatality. I turned around, didn't even watch the fatality. And I said to the kid behind me, "You can take my game." And I left. And that was that was my first night of playing UMK3.
Jesus.
And I can remember like it was yesterday. It's like one of those things, like if you could hook my brain up to like a holographic simulator, I could make that whole thing happen for you right there. It's friggin' awesome.
That's awesome. It's almost like you walked away like Kung Lao, like just taking the hat off.
I did. I just like did the little finger thing across the blade.
Jeez, that's awesome. That's awesome to hear that. Now you mentioned also like there being like a Chicago scene in Polo, and then there's Eddie. I remember hearing the Eddie name before. Like, who was that?
So Eddie Verrier, I met him when I tested MK9.
Wait, wasn't he? I'm sorry, Arcade in a Box. Is that the same guy?
No.
Okay,
Ed Ferrara, I think.
Okay.
I think his name is Ferrara at Arcade in a Box. So yeah, Eddie was I assume, again, this is a secondhand knowledge of how he got started. I assume that he was like a player in the Chicago area in the 90s. And then they picked him up to probably test, like, what was it? Probably, when's the first one that we see him? I want to say it was like, see, this is where you need Jim Fink, because he knows everything about these guys. It was definitely a console version that I first saw, but it might have been UMK3 that he's in the credits for the first time. I'm not 100% on that.
Okay.
But they picked him up, so far as I know, as a salaried tester, and he was with the company for a very long time. He was there when I tested MK9. I don't know what he does now.
Oh,
but
so he was potentially still with NetherRealm.
He was, yes. And when we went to Goro's lair, it was me, Conqueror, Tom Brady,
Crazy, right?
Crazy Bone. Yes. I'm trying to think of who was there when the story I'm about to tell you happened. So like we're in Goro's lair and we're just messing around.
Well, Czech was there too, right?
Czech was there as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Mo and Thrower also from Chicago. So everybody knows the history that some of us have with like UMK3, and Eddie played it a lot back in the day. And I showed him some corner tech in UMK3 that is like a frame trap, which for those of you who aren't aware, frame trap is basically where you have to respect the timing on things, because you're going to get hit by it no matter what, whether you block or you don't block. So you can kind of choose to get hit or choose to block, and then it gets a little confusing. But there's a strategy in the corner that is virtually, if not totally, inescapable. And when I showed Eddie, I was just like, how the hell did you miss this? And I'm showing it, and he's trying to get out. He can't get out, and he's like, "Ooh, I like that. Oh, I would have used that back in the day." So I was like, "Oh, there's your answer." But yeah, that's my only experience with him was during the MK9 testing. So I don't really know him that well, and I don't know if my story is 100% accurate.
That's fine. I assume him and Paula are obviously pretty close, or at least somewhat, because of both working at NetherRealm, or both being in Chicago for that matter.
Yeah. And then there was also another guy. Okay, so I don't want to take too many stories away in case you ever do interview Summoning.
It'd be nice to actually have Summoning on with us, and even James too. It'd be cool to have James on as well.
to get an old school night going. Um, but there was a guy who went by the name of the Grinch back in the day, who was Brian LeBaron, who was like a community manager type, if I remember correctly, or he was probably some involved with the development of the games in some way back.
Yeah.
For Brian, he did some interviews and stuff. He actually dropped some of our names because when we tested MK9, they treated the NDA as like, this is gospel. Like, you guys cannot talk about this game. You can't tell anybody that you're testing. It was very serious. At least it was presented to us. And then after that, with Injustice, and then didn't seem like it was. Obviously, they weren't allowed to, release the secrets, and everything, because they're very big on like the whole like secrets and like don't let anybody know who the characters are going to be and stuff. Because like they like to, like, I don't know, like everybody's like open up birthday presents from them or something like that. It's like, no, we just want to know who's going to be in the game, So anyway, so Brian was one of those guys who like would find fatalities. So like he would just like have like a stack of quarters on the machine, and he would write down every combination that it could possibly be, and then try one, and then try to do another one if that didn't work, like all in like the same flow. And then he would just go through, and I want to say it was like one of Reptile's. The way Summoning would always say, it was like he found Reptile's second fatality in like MK2 or something like that. He's like, and then we got him the connections to get hired or something like that. But that's the story that Summoning tells. So again, I don't know, but that's what he told me, and he wound up Grinch became a very important part of the community, but nobody really would know about any of these guys until MK9, was because that's when they decided they wanted to reach out to the community. They wanted to kind of get our seal of approval because they knew that something existed. There wasn't really any, for years, like really worth, acknowledging, so to speak.
So what about and also another person I don't know a whole lot about, I've heard his name, is Lex. Who is that?
So Lex and I had at the time, before, let's say, before Armageddon came out, up until then and before, we had an extensive online rivalry, and we did meet at East Coast Championships, which was held at 8 on the Break for many years. There was like 12 of those, and that was by like 2007. So go back to the 90s. They were running tournaments. A few of those guys are still around that ran those tournaments, as a matter of fact. And that's where I kind of caught my big break, so to speak, running my own events. Like, I always did stuff for Big E, right, but I started to really like branch off at the Break. And I could like kind of round up guys on a random weekend, and 8 people from like Long Island and like Pennsylvania would show up at the Break just to play, UMK3 on a cabinet that barely worked. So we'd have to like tell them to switch the parts out every time we would go there. But so the thing with Lex built up to that ECC tournament. So going back, we'll shoot backwards now to what happened originally. The Prophet, whom we talked about in the previous one, comes up to me one day at work, and he goes, one of the old beta testers, I guess you referred to, or gameplay testers, he said, from Midway, because that's what we called it at the time, Midway, because that's who it was before they were NetherRealm. Right. He goes, this guy is dropping all of his knowledge and all the secrets about UMK3 on Shoryuken. He's like, every day he's like picking a character and like explaining like the best strategies with them and what they used to do back in the day. And like, again, you're talking back in the day in 2002. So back in the day is like 1996, Right. So all the strategies that they developed in Chicago, going back, like basically like the most like prolific strategy, is that the right word, was run jabs. And that was like basically developed, I would say, in the late 90s, and then that kind of like evolved a little bit throughout the 2000s. But Lex had this he called it like the compendium, and he would just go through like everything that he thought was, you know, the way to play. And like we started challenging him a little bit on the things that he was saying, and he did not like that because he basically thought this stuff is dead, nobody's going to play this anymore, might as well just like let all, you know, all the tricks out. And you know, it kind of push came to shove, and it started becoming, look guys, you can't beat me, and
Okay, so this is
you're never
after.
gonna beat me. This is your. I mean, this is only 2003. You know, so he's getting all the Chicago guys starting to come out of the woodwork, and then like other guys I knew, like Dream TR was another one. Jason Wilson, who he also was involved in testing and writing the strategy guys, and strategy guys. He has a arcade, I believe, in I want to say Tennessee. Does that sound right? But he was like the MK2 player back in the day. You know, and Jax, if I remember correctly, and he was like the guy to beat for MK2, while Lex was the guy to beat for UMK3, you know, and then like Tom Brady was the guy to beat for MK4. Like it went like so on. So and James MK was the guy to beat probably for MK1, but MK1 didn't really have the cohesive like scene that like once really started coming along, probably not until like MK3, a little bit with MK2, you know, but like it's kind of foggy a little because like I don't really know what went on at the time. It's only what I've heard.
So just to be clear,
yeah.
though, with this thing with Lex and like him coming out of the woodwork and kind of challenging, that was like, this is obviously years after UMK3 is out, correct?
Yeah, this is.
Okay.
I mean, MK3 came out in '95, and we're talking 2003 now.
Okay, so 8 years.
This
8
stuff
years
is-
later.
Yeah, and arcades are dead and everything.
Right.
We had started trying to rebuild the 2D scene in like 2001, 2002. We started coming out for tournaments in 2001. Big E saw that we were coming out to the events, and you know we were really interested in, you know, getting people to come out. So he asked us to help him build the scene for the 2D MK, and it was a very, very slow build, but eventually we did see some success. And along that time, we started making combo videos for UMK3 and a little bit for like Trilogy.
Right.
And we took some heat from these same guys, the Chicago crew. And it's funny because like there's a bunch of guys whom we never met and were on the boards and just trash talking, but then there were like the guys who would come out to the events who were like, you know, cool, they just wanted to play, but those are their buddies from back in the day, so you know they gotta back them up. So you got like Mo and Mo30W and Thrower, who were all part of the what's it called, like this little like circus that was going on Shoryuken. There's still some of it, if you look it up, you can still find some of it from some of the archives. But it built up to Lex basically saying nobody can beat him. That was ultimately what happened. And he came out to it was like, I guess it was like 03, I want to say. He came out to ECC that year, the East Coast Championships. I didn't know about it. I didn't know the break existed yet, and I didn't know about the tournament, and he was there, so we could have met then. I don't know how, because we knew who we were. Like, he was there, you know? Like, I knew who Lex was, and Lex knew who I was, but nobody told me that there was a UMK3 tournament, or at least a building that had a UMK3 machine in it, you know? that
Right.
that could have went, you know, it's only 40 minutes from my house, and I could have went and played. So the next year, we did an official UMK3 tournament, which was run by Jet Fee, who was a very prominent person in helping get the spotlight and in tournaments on these old MK games, because he really liked them too, and just nobody played them. You know, that was it. It's just, you know, it goes, you know, with, you know, the wind, or I should say, like the pendulum swings with these games.
Right.
You know, Street Fighter was, you know, the game, and then MK kind of came in for a little while, but then like the Versus games started to take over, and you know, and then like Tekken, and then it kind of like goes back and forth a little bit, and MK just kind of got lost in the shuffle. So finally, the following year was ECC 10, and that one was when Lex, Mo, and Thrower all came from Chicago, and we had some guys from Long Island come out.
And
And
this
then
is at the break, right?
this was at the break, and then Julian Robinson was also there. So we had this like 9-player round robin of like the only people in the country who gave a shit about MK. Like,
And Julian, where was he from?
he was from Philly.
Okay, because that's another name I've heard before.
Yeah, we were talking about him in the last one a little bit. Great dude, but so they came out. We did a round robin, and at this point, Lex had stated that I would not even beat him around if I played him in tournament. It was getting that serious, right? Yeah, this is, you know, I'm like, what was it? I say it was 2005. So I'm 24, so I'm still relatively young in the scene, and not that experienced really with tournament play. And you know, we played some casuals, and he beat me pretty good in casuals. And then the tournament comes around, and I beat him 2-zip in tournament. And it's like, we're not going to talk about this? Like, you literally just said for 2 years straight, at least, like, you know, once a month or whatever, you know, coming on the boards, that nobody's worth your time and that you're the best in the world. Like, he made, like, there's no bones about it. Like, he really made it seem like he was untouchable in the game. Meanwhile, Mo beat him in the tournament too. So, but anyway, I beat him 2-zip. Right? I never made it a big deal, by the way, on the boards, but I'm making it a big deal right now. This is a long time ago. This is almost 15 years ago. I beat him 2-zip in tournament, and he walks away, and he says, "This is all just for fun, right?" That's what he said. How do you talk trash to somebody for 2 years straight, and then they beat you in tournament, and you say, "This was just for fun"?
Because you just got your shit handed to you. That's why.
Exactly. And it was so bittersweet because I recorded a bunch of matches from that one, and my battery died, and I had to walk like a quarter mile to my car, right, to get the camera to start. I was, because it was packed, so it was like, okay, there's people here. I didn't know really, you know, first walking in if they were really going to show up. So I went back to my car and got my camera. And I started recording it. There's like a handful. I probably could dig them up, but there's like a handful of matches. One guy recorded one match of me and Lex in casuals. And he told me, he's like, whatever his name was on Sugar, he's like, oh, message me. He's like, I'll get you copies of videos or whatever. And he never did it. I was really pissed. But nobody got any video footage of me and Lex. And everybody on Shuriken was pissed. Because they're like, what the hell? Like, you guys have been talking about this for 2 years, and you played each other, and you didn't get any matches on tape?
Yeah, that does suck. Yeah, it does suck.
Very, very frustrating. But it's like heat of the moment kind of thing. Like, we just wanted to play, you know, and like, it mattered more to us, I think. But like, people really did want to see it. Because you got to remember, there was already like Hanzo and like Ninja Grinder. I think they were already also.
Oh, man, yeah, you keep saying these names, yeah.
You know, like, I don't want to like say like they were definitely the ones that were there, but they were. It was in the ether. Like, everybody kind of knew that this was like a build, and boom, like it happened, and it was like I said, very bittersweet. But after that, we did basically, you know, smooth everything out, and you know, we collaborated a little bit here and there on some videos, and then there were like some other guys who kind of came around like online only because they were like from like Europe and stuff, and they started, you know, making like, you know, their own like kind of challenges, and it's very hard to play people online for, you know, any kind of like, you know, serious notoriety. And we backed each other up a lot, you know, and then all of a sudden, I guess it was shortly after, it must have been Seasons Beatings 2011, because that was like the last significant MK tournament that I won, UMK I should say. And Mo was in that tournament, and No Doubt was in there, Rio, you know, so there were a few like very good players in there. And Lex messaged me saying congratulations for beating Mo. You know, that was just like a thing, because you know that's one of his boys, you know. And but then like shortly after that, like he removed me from social media, and I was like, okay, it's gonna be like that, huh? And that was it. I never talked to him again.
Just couldn't take it. It was
I
eating away at him.
I don't know. I really don't know. It's unfortunate because I would have liked to see him come back when we had that jump start in like 2010, but like he just wasn't around. You know, the falling out afterwards. I don't even know if you call it a falling out, but whatever the case may be, I don't know what happened in that situation. But he's like one of the few guys from back in the day that I had like any kind of consistent contact with, because we used to talk on like AIM and stuff a lot, and theory and everything with the games, and but I know he still does talk to some people, but just haven't heard from him in a very long time. But I know he's off doing his own thing, so
that's something though that if he ever did like make a splash and kind of come back, theoretically that'd be something that would be very exciting to
it'd have to be for pay though, but because I don't think he really cares about the new games.
No. What I was getting at is similar to our last conversation with you and Joe playing UMK3 as that exhibition, just how exciting it was. It would be the same thing, even if it was during MK11, and in between you have like Lex versus Shock, like a 15-year-old rivalry or whatever for UMK3. That would be hype as hell in my opinion. But another player that I wanted to ask you about, and you kept mentioning those other players that slipped my mind, like Ninja Grinder, Hanzo, but Marva Rasta. Did we already kind of cover him?
We didn't. I wanted to get back to him, as a matter of fact. I'd mentioned that for at least my knowledge, he came around during the Xbox Live year, which is like more than 10 years after.
That's right.
But it's hard because he's not from around here, so it's like, how the hell do you know who he is?
Right.
But when he showed up for that tournament for NEC 11, I mean, he totally just backed up like everything. Not even that he was saying it. It's just that all of his reputation, I guess you could say. And he won that tournament, and I mean, he beat Crazy Dominican in that very convincingly. Although Crazy Dominican basically just like showed up for the tournament and went home, which isn't the first time he's done that, by the way. Where there was a tournament going back. I think it was like NEC 7 or something like that, and I wound up like holding off the bracket and just not playing any matches on like one side of the bracket until he showed up. And remember, you're only dealing with like 12 or 16 people, so there's not a lot of time, so we wound up waiting until like almost like 9 p.m. for him to get there so he could play. But I remember him telling me not to start. He's like, please don't start the tournament. He's like, I'm on the way, because he's coming from Long Island to Philly, and that's a couple hours.
Right.
But yeah, Marv, man, I had a lot of fun playing against him, because and a lot of people I know, they like ask me sometimes, they're like we see you play in tournament, and they're like, we feel like you're not taking it seriously sometimes, or like I'm screwing around, which I guess, and sometimes I do combo hunt in tournament, and I get a little greedy, but playing against like Marv, he has such a style that the flow of the match goes at a pace that's like, you almost start building like patterns that you don't normally do, so he's kind of forcing you to make mistakes. And I like when I feel like that's happening, because then I feel like I can play a little more freely, like I can kind of change up and like get a little confusing. And that's how I felt every single time I played him, and I did very well against him, all things considered. Like out of everybody I saw like play against him in casuals, like he mopped like everybody.
He played Cabal, correct?
Yes.
And he kept doing. I remember the match during. I could have swore
the fireballs
that I recorded that, but he kept doing that jump in combo, but he kept doing it. He did it like maybe 2 or 3 times.
Oh, the relaunch combos.
Yeah, I was like, what the hell is that? And I remember everyone like being so hype about it, but I was like, what the hell did he just do? I didn't know.
I give you a little bit of history on the the discovery of how that works. So this probably goes back to like 90s Chicago. Apparently, it was known back then that Sub-Zero could do that. The masked Sub-Zero, at least. He could only do it to a few characters, but he could do it very consistently due to the recovery off of the launcher in that combo. It's a slower recovery, so all you have to do is hold up forward afterwards, and the timing to hit them so that it restands them is... It's not that there's any more of a window to hit it. It's just that like it can't not hit it. I guess that's like the best way to describe it. Like it'll like whiff, but because the punch is active, it'll still catch them like on the way down. It's kind of a convenience the way the boxes line up. But because of that, people discovered it with him in particular. And then I remember playing somebody. I guess it was on Kylera, and they mentioned the Sub-Zero combo. I can't remember who that was. It might have been like some random person, but it was at least 15 years ago. And that was when we started making the combo videos, which was like around like 03. So it was more than 15 years ago. So I started experimenting with other characters, and the Prophet one night told me, he's like, I can get this with like Melina, with Cabal, with like, starts like rattling off all these characters. And I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, can every character do this? Because like, you're not thinking like this is like a universal thing.
You're talking the relaunch thing, right?
Yeah. And we're like, holy shit. Like this is like obviously you can't, like only like a few characters can do it to every character. So it's not like it's that big of a deal. But we started messing around with that, and Cabal can do it pretty reliably on certain characters, but not all of them. But it's a fun thing to see somebody hit that, like in because the timing is pretty tough. But sometimes you see people hit like 3 or 4 in a row, and it's like 70% damage, and you're like, holy shit, like that. But
okay,
but
so
I remember him doing that very consistently, and then also the instant air fireballs. He was using those a lot.
Well, guess what? Yeah, I did. I'm sure you remember at that tournament I was like recording like everything.
Yeah.
Well, I found it. I do have it.
Beautiful.
I'll add it to. They could be watching it as like right now. But yeah, at the very end of it, sure enough, Marv, he's there. They start with, let's say it's Smoke versus Cabal.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the one. It's like 6 minutes and 17 seconds long. It has a...
Get on Smoke? It's harder to get on the mill.
It has over 1,000 views. So,
nice.
But yeah, I'll add it to this. But,
cool.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, Marv, though, amazing. He's definitely... in the top, probably top 3 that I played in person, because it's hard to say. There's
how did you even meet him? Was it just through the online Xbox stuff?
Yeah, he played a lot online. I don't know if I ever really played him online. I may have, but he just... I don't know if he moved to Florida, if he was living there for a little while. But he was really there, not on chance, but I think he just happened to be, like, in the States or whatever at the time.
Where's he from?
I don't know, honestly. I don't. I don't know where he's from.
He is. I'm pretty sure. I'm sure he hasn't been active for a while, but I'm pretty sure he is on Test Right.
Yeah, he's on Facebook too.
Anyway, yeah, I was gonna look for him quick, but it's probably been years since he signed in. But anyway,
But yeah, he amazing player. Just really just his like I said, his like tempo is like he's constantly moving at you, and it was a lot of fun to play against him. Because I feel like most players have like a very cookie cutter strategy. They all do the same stuff with the same characters, so it's like very rare when you get to play against somebody who has like a very carved out style. That's how I felt, at least, against him. I'm sure like there's other players who do play like him, but I had never played against somebody who played quite like that. but there were a lot of good players in that tournament. That was probably the best overall talent that we ever saw in the States in a UMK3 tournament. I'll say that. I mean, Seasons Meetings was good, but it was not NEC that year. NEC that year was like, if we didn't have MK9, we probably would have saw, I mean 64 player brackets, I think, probably by the next Summer Jam. That's my personal guess on how the 2D games were, how that scene was growing was amazing at that point. But we took a hit with MK9, and we still ran tournaments here and there. But
well, UMK3 is still hype as hell. I mean, no matter who you are, every single aspect, from the sounds of it to the sound effects to the voices to the combos to just the grittiness of the game. Yeah. How can you not love it? I mean, really.
And now we got Drew, who works on UMK Plus. He's been running several years now. He's been doing Get It in Ohio, and he's got another one coming up in 6 weeks. So he's going to get some good players out for that, definitely. I'm going to try to do something this summer. I'm waiting until after Get It in Ohio is done, just because when you're running a tournament for like a few people, really, like it's like a handful of people, you don't want to like steer them away. You got to make sure like everything is good. So like I don't want to announce like a tournament, and then have people decide like, oh, maybe I'll go to that one because it's closer. It's like, let that one run, and I got like 3 months to promote the other one after that. So that'll be like the week before Evo, but we'll see what happens. Because I was asked to do a tournament by a guy who runs a new arcade down in South Jersey. So, and he runs a big convention at a hotel in Cherry Hill, which is in New Jersey. So that'll be good. But definitely anybody listening who's into the old school stuff, and if you're, remotely in the Ohio area, or you're willing to travel for a full weekend dedicated to Classic MK, you got to check out Get It in Ohio. And it's run by Drew Drusus. So, and he's got his UMK Plus, I was saying, is a fantastic, it's like a restoration project for UMK3, because the time constraints for UMK3's release originally resulted in them not being able to fully explore the limits on, or the ROMs on the board, so they had to replace the ROMs rather than add ROMs. And ROMs hold the memory for the game, so when you're dealing with like a tiny amount of data and a lot of money at the time, it's easier to just replace stuff than it is to add new. So with that, we have several hacks going on right now for the classic MK games, but his purpose of his is to add back in the features and complete some of the stuff that's incomplete from the original, which we have, since we have access to like source code now, and a better understanding of assembly and hacking tools that are just out of this world. It's really made it a really fun thing to work on and see, especially like he just added Rain recently, and Rain was not even like it wasn't even really a character in UMK3. He was like just a sort of like an afterthought. They put him into the intro because that's the kind of things that they would do, is weird stuff like that. But he added a fully playable Rain based upon the Mortal Kombat Trilogy version, and it is fantastic. Like arcade, better than what they would have done, I think, in the arcade for some of the stuff that he did with him, especially with like the fatalities and whatnot. But he's really done a good job with that. So if anybody is carrying on the spirit of UMK3, it's Drew. It's Drew. And unfortunately, he said that for whatever reason he didn't really come around before, because he's like roughly like our age. it's a shame that he's only really come around the scene for like a few years now. But yeah, he's come a long way. So.
Now, the next Big E event that you'll be at, or East Coast event, I guess with obviously MK11 coming out March 20th. March.
I think it's April.
April 23rd.
Yeah, that's gonna unfortunately. I think that's gonna miss April Annihilation. I can't remember where the date is for that.
When's East Coast tournament? That's usually June, right?
No, they've changed that. ECT was in May or June for like the first, I want to say 7. I think the first 7 events were flip-flop between May and June, and they went to September. So that's been, I don't really have anything to do with ECT anymore. But the next big event, I will be at Winter Brawl this weekend. But the next one, I think, I can't remember what the date is for April Annihilation, but I'm thinking, if I remember correctly, it's not going to make it. It may actually be like a couple days before the release. I don't remember. But I have to look at the date on that. I should check that out real quick.
Got that. And then also Summer Jam. That's obviously summer.
Yeah. That should be.
So I'm looking to actually come out to possibly Summer Jam then.
Okay.
Depending on scheduling and all that stuff. But yeah.
I'm also gonna run. Yeah, it's April 12th. So yeah, that's not gonna make it for MK11, unfortunately. So we're gonna have to wait till Summer Jam for a Big E MK tournament. He'll probably be running it for if he does his monthlies, but I'm going to run something probably in May, something small, at Yestercades in Westfield, New Jersey, and that should be a pretty decent event. I mean, we used to run locals. Did you bump any of those locals we did for like MK9? And we did MK9 Injustice and MKX fairly.
Not really the locals. I was always at the
features.
Yeah, Big E events or
ECTs.
Yeah.
So we used to run a couple times a year. So my original run at Yestercades, I had set I had picked all these dates that I thought were like the perfect timing between like majors that I knew people were going to go to, or they were close enough that I didn't want to interfere, because I'm very conscious about the timing for events and
sure,
maximizing your turnouts and everything. So I would just work around them, and so I had January, April, July, and October, and for me that was like a perfect date schedule to run MK9. But I ran one MK9 tournament, and then a bunch of guys from the area all contacted me and were like, we want to run bi-weeklies at Yestercades. And I was just like, I was like, I can't say no.
Right.
It's gonna affect how I run my stuff. So I was like, okay, I guess we'll just do the bi-weeklies. And we did for a little while. It was okay. But we then, after those went away, I went back and I did my full year schedule for those months, and it built every single time. It was fantastic. But the problem after MKX was the interest in locals really reduced, and I could not see any reason to run an Injustice 2 tournament, which sucked because I would have liked to run more local with Yestercades, but it's also very cramped when you get a lot of people in there. I mean, the square footage without the machines is nice, but when you have 85 to 100 arcade machines in the building and patrons at the same time, it becomes, we had one tournament there where we had a bunch of the popular games at the time. We did over 110 players, and there were over 120 patrons. So you're talking 200-something people in this, cramped building, and it was like fire hazard time.
Yeah.
It was pretty bad, but it was great. Make no mistake about it. I want to do MK11 tournament where we fill up the building, I just don't know if it's feasible anymore, because the scene doesn't feel as family-like anymore. I don't know if that's the way other people see it, but from what I talk to people, is it's definitely been different since Injustice 2. You used to have, like, VSM would be, for anybody, again, unfamiliar with VSM, this was a local on Long Island that had, like, a mix of, like, 50 people who would come, every other week. So you'd have a mix of, like, 25 people every week. It just depended on who would show up, but there was a lot of people who came to VSM all the time. It was a very well concentrated area of players, and it was very, very family-like in organization. So you could then run a local every couple months, and you have this, like, built-in pool where, like, then everybody's going to show up,
Right.
and then some. Like, I ran, let's see, I ran an MK9 tournament at Yestercades when Yestercades was brandy new. Like, it was crispy new. I think they were there for like 2-3 months. We had 40-something players, and I think it was 6 states and Canada. Think about it.
Wow.
That was a local. 40-something players, 6 states, Canada, at a little arcade in the middle of New Jersey, right by Kevin Smith's comic shop. But the turnout for that was good, considering we only ran the one game. Like, that was it. Like, literally, it was just show up with pizza, hang out. We have, like, awards and everything. It was like it was really, like, cozy little thing, and I just don't feel that anymore. So I feel like that was a lot of the draw and, like, what would made it worth running. So I'm gonna try getting. I know we're kind of like.
I think part of that, VSM Valley Stream Monsters doesn't really. That, of course, has been split up and just things moving around, but also people branching off and communicating through different forms of social media. They're on the forums. Some of them are on the forums or Twitter. I feel like that's part of it. Everything's kind of split up. There's Discord, so it just kind of everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do agree. The fracturing does happen when, like, cliques form within, like, a bigger group like that. But I still think that, like, that weeklies could be a thing if you could kind of convince people that it's better to learn in person than it is to. Of course. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, it just is. Like, whether it's like subjective or not, it is better to learn these games in person. But whatever the case may be, and that's not taking anything away from anybody who's been, like, an online warrior who's walked in and won a tournament, because we know that happens. But it's like I don't know. It's better for the community, obviously, to be the community. So, with that said, Yestercades in May. Definitely, anybody in the tri-state area who wants to come out, we will do a smallish event. Looking for like 50 people, and there'll be plenty of setups. I'll definitely have like 9 setups for MK11, so there'll be no worries there. And they have, like, some. Actually, I think they have all 3 arcade games. So if anybody wants to play those, and there's like a few other fighters mixed in here and there, and it's just a friggin' awesome place. 8,000 square feet of friggin' arcade games. If you like that stuff, it's the place for you to go. So anyway, we've gotten way off the topic.
It's okay. It's all UMK3, so
and it's
for the most part, so we're good. So I guess we'll kind of wrap this one up, and but
there's definitely some other names.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is there any other names that you can think of? I mean, we could always save some for another.
We could, if we can get some other people on too. If we get, like, summoning on, because I think, like, he's like getting up right about now. over speeding. What time is it? It's like 2 something.
Oh, let's see over there. I was gonna say it's 2:30 a.m. for me.
Yeah, so it's 8:30 for him.
Okay.
So I could talk to him. Maybe we could try to
Yeah, even just get a list of names, and even those who listen to this point, I thank you. But if there's anyone that you've heard of that you would like to know more about, that any of us have knowledge of, that we can speak of.
Yeah, so there's people that I have knowledge of who have never met me, have no idea who I am. It's just that I've heard stories about. So like I said, I like to try to get
but that's better than
who really know firsthand, because they'll be able to tell me like because I could hear from two guys who were at the same place at the same time and get two different stories from me. And if you're talking with James MK and summoning, you're definitely going to hear that. So so anyway, but yeah, for anyone who's really interested in the scene and how it operated as in tournament fashion, those would be the guys to talk to, because I was a real loner. I was like Cabal, like wandering around the Nomad, just playing anybody I could in UMK3, and like most of the time never seeing those people ever again. And I do remember one time in Atlantic City, I've told a few people this story before, and I can only assume that the people I must have been playing like James MK. Like that's what it feels like. He was that kind of person. So I'm like 14, 15 or whatever. Like UMK was out for like a little bit, and I'm I got nothing to do. I'm just like a teenager, and I'm playing UMK3. There's nobody in. This kind of goes back to a story I was telling a little bit at the previous one about the casino gaming. So I'm playing UMK3, and there's these guys, like they just seem like New Yorkers to me. I don't know if that's like a stereotype or whatever, but they seemed like New Yorkers, the way they were talking and their gesturing and stuff like that. It's when you're from New Jersey, you know what a New Yorker is like. So they're playing Ermac. When I say they, it's because there was this thing we used to do back in the day where you'd have your one guy who wasn't good play the new guy who shows up, and if your guy lost the first round, you would push him out of the way and you would take this next round. That was
we are many, you are but one.
Because you didn't want the new guy to take control of the machine. That was and you figure if you could beat him, then if the other guy could study it. There was a lot of psychology. So I experienced this in the reverse. But again, this was at Harrah's in Atlantic City. There was this little arcade up in the third floor. And I have I had already, think about this. I'm 15, right? I already have a 10-year history in this arcade in Harrah's. Actually, more than that, because they had a nursery in casinos back in the day. I don't think it's legal to do anymore, but you could drop your kid off, you could sign them in, and they would have basically young teenage kids or whatever just watching your kids while you go gamble. That was the thing. And when I was like probably 3 years old, I was probably getting put in the nursery. That's what they called it. It was like a daycare in the middle of the casino. I don't know how much it cost or whatever, but they dropped me off, and I would they call it Dutch doors, where they're like split in half, and like the top half can open up, and so that you could the adults could talk basically,
right.
And kids were locked in there, and they had all kinds of games and TV, probably board games and stuff, and little activities, and it was organized and everything. But I just remember standing and looking over the Dutch doors and watching the kids playing the arcade games. I didn't want to have anything to do with anybody who was in there. I just wanted to get out and play Rampage and Quartet and all these old ass games. I'm talking 1986, so it's 86, 87, and eventually the beat 'em ups started coming out, and then the fighting games started coming out. So I grew up with every wave of new game that came out. So here I am, 15 years old. I'm walking in, and there's nobody in there. Arcades are dying. It's a very depressing thing. And there's just these two guys playing UMK3. And I play the first guy and beat him. And the other guy's smoking a cigarette, because you could still smoke at the indoors and everything back then. And you'd have cigarette burns all over your arcade cabinets. You could tell. We always could know if we had played on a certain arcade machine in our area in a different place, because you'd recognize the patterns of the cigarette burns on the control panel.
Jeez.
People putting them out. But so the second guy he pushes the other guy out of the way. He puts a cigarette out on the cabinet, and he starts playing me as Ermac. And I remember them doing like anti-air high kicks. I had never seen anybody like so consistently like beat like jump-ins. And I was like learning as I'm playing there. And then I figured out how to beat them, and then they left. Like I didn't know, like they could have come back with like a fucking like knife or something like that. I don't know, but obviously never saw these guys again. And I only really got to play them the one match. But that's like one of my like kind of like weird moments, like because like I'm just like by myself, literally just like by myself in the middle of this casino, and like I don't know if I'm pissing off the wrong people, but you got to win the game. It's you're not just gonna like, I better let these guys win.
You're playing to win.
Mm-hmm. I do remember walking down the boardwalk. Let's see, it was. I must have been a little bit older. I think I like went down to like AC with like my mother like on like an off like weekend. I don't really like going to AC because I'm not a gambler, but like I went down there and I must have been probably about I guess 20-ish, something like that. So we just like went down there for like it was in like the middle of the week because she always gets comps. She's down there all the time still. So I remember walking past this old. I wanted to see if this old arcade was still there, and it was called Playcade. And I remember going back to like when like Indiana Jones came out. I mean, when Indiana Jones the arcade came out, like that was a long time ago, right? So here we are in the 2000s, because that was the 80s. We're in the 2000s, so it's like 2000, 2001. And I remember going by this arcade, and I'm like, oh my god, it's still there. And I'm like, what do they have in there? And like they still had Ninja Turtles from 1989. It was I probably hadn't moved in 11 years. Sitting in that arcade. Yeah, it was in the same spot. Like I'm like, oh my god, like this place. They had like all the skee ball and the prizes in the back and shit. And there was like Marvel 2. And there were these two guys playing, and like my mother was with me. We were walking like looking for like a place to eat, and I was like, well, let me see if Playcade is still here. And I like go in there, like I want to play these guys. And my mother's like, let's get out of here, because we're at like the south end of the boardwalk. That's like where you can start to hear the gunshots and shit. So like she was like, we probably should just get out of here. And I'm like, god damn it! I was like, I just want to play some Marvel too. But that place never had MK as far as I remember, so we can write off Playcade. But yeah, lots of stories, lots and lots of stories. Man,
I love it.
I give one little quick one. It's on the personal story. It was definitely late 90s, and I was going. You know what? You know how I know? Because I think we were going to see The Matrix. It was me and Dreamer NJ. We went to the movie theater by my house. It was in Hazlet, New Jersey. And we knew they still had MK there. And I remember the screen was like starting to like fade green. It was like a kind of like a shorter cabinet. And this guy walks up, and he's like, "Mind if I play?" And I was just like, "Not at all. I always love playing somebody." So So he jumps on and he picks Robot Smoke, and I don't know. I was like Sindel or something like that. And he's like kind of not like talking trash, but he's like kind of saying, like he's pretty good or whatever, And I beat him pretty good the first match, and then the second match he turns into Human Smoke, and I beat him even worse in the second match, and he got really mad. And I was like, because that would happen sometimes. Like, a lot of people like don't know how to take losing or whatever, and he just kind of like maybe like banging the machine a little bit or whatever, and then he walked away. And all I remember is Dreamer NJ turning around and saying like, "Humble pie, anyone?" Because like the guy was talking trash, and he didn't know what he was doing, but like he didn't know what he was doing. But yeah, but that was that was another one. There's a lot, actually, probably a lot of weird experiences playing these games.
Pissed off a lot of people, Shock. Pissed off a lot.
Good.
Yeah, way to go. Maybe I was gonna say I'll be waiting for that Lex versus Shock match. That'll be amazing.
Yeah, if he wants to come down, I think it's in Canada, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's where he is. Maybe I could be wrong.
Well, yeah, we'll have to make a list of anyone that we missed, and again, anyone who has questions about either players or years, eras, or even, different games, because probably the one game that I could save this for the next episode or so, but the one game that I missed out on that I kind of regret is MK4, even though it's kind of looks filthy in a way because it's like 3D.
It's only 3D rendered. It's still a 2D game.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, people do. I can understand why people think it's a 3D game because it has like sidestepping, but like the sidestepping that is like less useful than like dodging in like SNK games. It's really just not good.
The characters in that game I love. You have like Fujin, Breiko, and just the plethora. The game that I can't stand, the one that I couldn't stand the most is probably Armageddon. The aerial combat, that's a lot of here.
That was a total cash cow on that one. They were like to throw everything in and give a new gimmick, and that was the air combos. That game I don't even want to talk about. But but MK4, I was hyped about MK4, not like I was for 3. But I was hyped for it, and I remember one of the first times that like I downloaded like a trailer. I guess you could call it a trailer. You can still find this video, by the way. It's like an MK4 trailer from '97 or whatever, and it was an MPEG. And I just remember like it being just really tiny and grainy and like pixelated. And I remember them showing like the Raiden like electricity. He's got like over the head, and then like you see like the close up of Sonya, and then like she was like wearing red, so it was like kind of like strange, And then like it had like this like KMFDM type music playing in the background, and it was hype and it looked interesting, but it looked weird. But I still had high expectations for it. However, I went to the Monmouth Mall, and the Monmouth Mall is also in New Jersey. It's like by like they call it the Shore Points. It's kind of close to the area. There was a crowd around a machine when I walked in, and I was just like, oh, this has got to be MK4, So I kind of get that like similar feeling of going to the Freehold Mall when I would play UMK3. But when I looked over the kids' shoulders and I was watching them play, for whatever reason, my instant, and again, I'm only like 16 years old, so my brain should still be able to like accept new things and like go with them and then try to figure out something I like about it. But my instant reaction was just, ugh. it just didn't look right for some reason. And it sounded cool. Graphically, it looked graphic. Hear my friggin' New Jersey accent, but graphically, it looked good. But it didn't look like it had the same flow to me. It seemed very, like, the suddenness of the movements. A lot of that started happening with games as they started getting quicker. Like, it's one thing to be fast, but it's another thing for, like, stuff that just happened where you can't react to it anymore. And that's what I felt like it started to look like with MK4. But I did try MK4 eventually, about probably like a year later, at another mall where I was just randomly at some mall with my friends, because I think we like gotten our licenses, so this must have been like '98. And we went to some like small, like crappy mall, and they had an arcade, and there was nobody in it, of course, because that's just what it was. Arcades were dying, if not already dead. And I saw an MK4 machine, so I was just like, let me give it a shot. So like I went through and I beat it with Raiden the first time I played it. Like I literally just went through and beat the game. Like I was just like, what is this? I was like, even like the CPU, like just I don't know if it was on like easy difficulty setting or whatever, but I just did not feel anything, like no connection to the game at all. And obviously I didn't have anybody to play against it. And so I never really got to experience 4. I just didn't really see it that often. Like I still was going to arcades and stuff, but in like the late '90s to early 2000s, I was still seeing MK2 and UMK3 everywhere. No MK4. I don't know why. And it was a very heavily rotated game, and there was like a company promoted tournament for that. Like, they had a road tour and everything for that game. It was really, really heavily marketed for tournament play. But I just never saw it. It's unfortunate. I was going to say, the Prophet, he would play in MK4 tournaments at the mall. But I didn't run into him until after all that was done. And like, people weren't really moving on to like Tekken and Soul Calibur. But MK4 just kind of, I don't know, just, it should have been like the game that I traveled for, considering like that I was able to drive. But just never happened, unfortunately. But I know Summoning loves MK4, loves it. So he could talk to you about it.
We'll have to get Summoning on sometime. Just has to coordinate a time with him with the time difference. But
yeah.
So I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up. We're about an hour and 20 minutes in, and again, we'll gather some topics for the next episode, and it'll probably be, again, kind of the next chapter from this one, because this just has such a great flow to it, and just so much to learn from again, your experiences, the players, the player histories, again, these names that we've, at least me, I have heard of, I'm sure others have heard of as well, and just...
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough to kind of like talk about like people that I don't like really know personally, and like again, like I've only heard things about. But like from like personal experiences, I'm totally up for talking about that. But if we can get people who actually know the people that we're talking about, probably would be a better idea.
Yeah, of course. It's not like you're talking shit about them,
No, I know, but talk about what I've heard. Like, they're gonna be like, "Who the hell told you that?" Like, it's gonna be that kind of thing. Like,
we're starting fresh beef in UMK3. Is that what you're saying?
Perfect. The scene always talks about we need rivalries. It's like you can't just invent them. It has to be natural. So, which unfortunately only really happens now when you have local scenes or people who are consistently showing up at tournaments and playing against each other.
Right.
So we need to have a game first in order to start that. So let's see what happens, and maybe we'll see some new amazing players show up and like bodying Sonic Fox, or anybody else. Or maybe Rio will come back, and all of a sudden Rio will be the talk of the town again.
I gotta say, this is totally biased, but like Rio's like one of, if not my favorite player, because such a down to earth like guy, and just super nice. It's kind of like soft spoken in a way, like when you see him in tournaments.
He's very, very chill.
He's very like, he asks a question, he's just he gives you really short answers, but he's just super cool like guy to be around. But just how his reactions were, when he was playing UMK3 and then MK9, I was sad to see him kind of fall off for, MKX, etc. But I'm really hoping, Rio makes it back for MK11. That would be hype as hell.
I really didn't see him. I know I definitely did see him at some point during MKX, but I didn't see him much. Right. Justice, obviously, he was around quite a bit using the Martian Manhunter.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, so he was in Justice, the first Injustice Gods Among Us.
Definitely there for Injustice for like, I want to say the first half of its lifespan, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
We're also, real quick, getting back to running tournaments. When I was running the MK9 tournaments, those, like I said, those kind of got stopped short. Like, we ran smaller ones more frequently than I wanted to run like a quarterly where we would get like 40-50 people out. Instead, we were running like more frequently, getting like maybe like 12 to like 16, something like that. So it's like harder to get people to travel more often, obviously. So you're gonna have different tournaments more often, rather than like a bigger tournament with like everybody, where you have like 8, like the top 8 could be like the top 8 for like 100 player major, where you have like 40 people who are all showing up to this, like, local. Sorry. The point I was going to make is, we still ran Injustice, but then we started doing well, as Combat Network, we started like working with Rapzilla when he was running his Long Island tournaments, the Monster Island tournaments. I don't know if you remember those.
Yeah, of course.
He had a pretty solid thing going at a Dave and Buster's out there. And then he kind of stopped running. He had the Blue Planet Comics a little bit, which was doing pretty well. And then he just kind of like fell out of it. And I feel like that was like the end of like the Northeast locals, other than like what was going on at the break, because like the break had very, very solid Injustice and MKX for a little while. But I feel like Injustice 2 just didn't really have a local scene like we were used to, and that was kind of disappointing.
Right. Yeah.
So we can see if maybe we can make up for that with MK11. So we'll work on that. But anyway, yes, that was the point. That's kind of like how I got out of running locals. Was sort of after the Monster Island stuff. I think I ran like a little bit after that. But I could see that I had to run more and more games every tournament in order to keep the attendance up, because you're running this in an establishment where people got to pay to come in, so you can't just be like, oh yeah, I got like 20 people like taking up your building all day. It's like, you got people taking up room. You gotta give them a you gotta give them a reason to run.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a business.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So
all right. Well, I think that's good for this episode, and
cool.
Till next time. But yeah, we'll get some feedback and get some the list for the next one, and we'll go from there.
Cool. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Shock.
Peace.
Yep.